one thing that resonated with me is when I started my business, a very successful, billionaire entrepreneur told me, Steve, you got to just pick up the phone and call. Like you can't be scared to call anyone. The most thing that's going to happen to you is they're going to hang up or tell you to F off. So it's like, and then, if you can't take that, you shouldn't be an entrepreneur to begin with.
Entrepreneurs, we are back with another show, and we are bringing on the lawyer for entrepreneurs. Steven and I were chatting before the show. He was in Miami. I'm over here in St. Pete. We had some laughs because he's a Packer fan, and now, of course, my Jets are doing what they're doing. So, Steven, thank you so much for taking the time to join us here on That Entrepreneur Show.
Oh, well, good to see you.
I'm excited to dive into this today. Everyone, we have a great episode ahead that will help a lot of us. How entrepreneurs and counsel can work together to increase the chances of a successful business and exit. Building and protecting e-commerce brands, low cost ways to protect e-commerce goods from counterfeiters and everything in between. But he's bringing experience as a senior attorney for a Fortune 50 communications company. And then, of course, as the founder of EmergeCounsel. And he does a lot more, so I can't wait to dive in. But everyone, if it's your first time with us, thank you. If you're a returning listener, thank you for helping me make this show a top 2.5% global podcast. I am humbled and I learned so much from each guest that has the ability to join me. And today we're going out to Denver to sit down with Steven. And today's show is brought to you by Coming Alive Podcast Production. Head to the link in bio to start your podcasting journey today. But Steven, of course, you've got success spanned out across your career, Fortune 50 company, but something led you to start your own show. Let's talk about that.
Sure. So, along with some successes, I've had some failures. After building up I'd say what I'd call it like a sophisticated legal career in tech, what happened is AT&T was my employer, and I was a counsel for AT&T for 14 states in the Western region. And then AT&T got bought, and as part of the exit package, they gave me money to do a startup. And so I was like looking through it, most people were just like, all right, what law firm do I go to or what other company? I'm like, wow, like somebody's giving me money to do a startup. And I went really large. I went into a predictive analytic. I decided that through data, and this was in around 2000, I don't know, 7 through 2014, that there was a lot of data on at-risk students in school districts, and that we could create predictive algorithms through some research at some major universities on how to make these kids successful and figure out which kids were most at risk and why, by basically crunching data. And we had our own predictive analytic tool. And so anyway, we started this predictive analytic company. It was, business to government is really hard. I had to raise a ton of money, and I had to manage investors, manage startup from the ground up, having no experience in startups, and really built the company to a multi-million-dollar company. Plus we had, I don't know, at the end we probably had like 50 employees, something like that, like some large number that I had no idea how to manage. So anyway, the point is the good, the bad, the ugly. It did well. The bad was it really took a lot out of me, and my father had cancer at the time and was dying and we had some really almost very successful exits strategies that almost came to fruition, but almost isn't good enough. And then ultimately I diluted myself out of my own company and lost control of it. And so I think I learned a lot about how to manage and help entrepreneurs from my own, successes, but there was also at the end was a pretty big failure on my part. That's really my practice really involves how to build a business. First, my first pillar of my practice is I know entrepreneurs. The last person you want, and when I had a business, I was the same way. The last person you want to talk to is the attorney. Like that's just not, you look at your schedule during the day, and talking to the attorney is not usually the part of the day that you're like, that's like the dentist when you need a root canal. And so the point being is this whole practice is focused on how to make an entrepreneur successful with minimal contacts, but meaningful contacts, and building a win-win relationship by knowing when you need me, having systemized approaches to various issues at the startup phase, various issues at the growth phase, and all moving towards a successful company that can exit. You might never want to exit. You might not be thinking about exit, but when you get to M&A, there's a due diligence sheet and you go through all the things that you didn't do, that starts devaluing the company to the point of, number one, you're going to be spending a lot of time and money with the attorney. Number two, you're going to be regretting that you didn't have this kind of roadmap that I will lay out in my various presentations from the very beginning.
I absolutely love that. And that's what this show is about. It's not just about the sexy wins, the big time, everything. It's about how we got there. And without failing, you don't have the lesson to learn. So it's great to see that you took it as motivation, continue to strive, continue to just make a big difference in your field. I want to start circling back to some of these areas you can provide value with today. You mentioned here there's a lot of counterfeiters in the e-commerce space. How do you go about protecting some of this?
Yeah, it's any business that is web-based or has a web presence is, look, at the very beginning of building your entity, you want brand identity. And what brand identity means is how, unless you have the cure for cancer, which I doubt most people do, if you have the cure for cancer, you have the cure for cancer, go to a patent attorney, get the patent, and you're going to be rich. And that's the end of that. The rest of us, somebody else is doing what we're doing. And so you have to build a client experience, which is the brand identity. The brand identity, every aspect of that is identified in a certain way. The trademark protects the actual name or logo. Your background is an excellent example of, I see that and I see your face and I know it's you. And I know this is, again, a top podcast. But how do I know that? It's a combination of brand identity. And so a good trademark attorney, which is a big part of my practice, is going to identify that and protect it for you. You have to start from the very beginning with trademark protection. There's just no two ways about it. And you have to take that very seriously. It's not something that like, oh, I think I'll do it myself on the USPTO, because that all sounds good until you hit problems or you get sued for trademark infringement because you didn't even know that there was a brand out there. And it really is kind of a sophisticated exercise, but not that expensive. Then the next thing is look at all your elements of what your brand is. So for example, if I went before the podcast, because I like to be prepared, I went and looked at your various collateral, like what you put out and who you've interviewed, and got an idea of that. And also your descriptions of what you describe or what you do and what your background is. And somebody, I think it's probably you or a copywriter, wrote all that. Now, that is something that you don't want emulated. You don't want your brand, your customer experience to be ripped off. And you would take those things and actually copyright them. And you might copyright those. Also, copyright means you protect kind of the image. And it can be words. It's anything in a fixed media. So it can be words. It can be clips of like a video clip. It can be a lot of times it's marketing copy. So when you look at your website, again, if you're in an e-commerce business, or you look at your product descriptions. And so if you're an Amazon seller, you might just do the product descriptions. If you're a Shopify seller or someone, you're going to, basically do the entire look and feel of your website. And you're going to take that and actually formally file a copyright application. And that's really, dirt cheap. The other thing you're going to do is internally, you're going to have some things that are trade secret. Like no one knows like who your supplier, no one should know who your supplier is. No one should know the elements that your supplier is putting on and that you are putting on. And that can be done through something, it's more contractual, but it's called a trade secret agreement. So anyone you work with signs this agreement that makes it seem, that all the things that we know are proprietary, stay proprietary. Then you take all these things together and you weave them together and you have it's like a sweater, So I look at it like somebody calls me for a trademark and I, sure, I'll do it. But that's like one thread of the IP plan. You take these things and you weave it together and you have a tightly knit sweater. Then when any infringement comes up, you have the tools to enforce against. And those tools can be used depending on how sophisticated your strategy is. Those tools can be local, meaning United States, or I do a lot of traveling internationally to build relationships with counsel all over the world so we can protect that plan internationally. I know you have a ton of questions, but just to jump in really quickly, how we know things are international is we trace the supply chain. So if you're supplying from China, and then we know that China has a little bit of an element of what you need to protect against because China is notorious for infringement. So, and then likewise, if you're selling and you're selling to Canada too, and you look at your orders, you're like, gosh, I have a lot of orders in Toronto. Then you're going to take that strategy and maybe add a little element to the Canadian strategy. So that's important for two reasons. Number one, to avoid infringement. And number two, because, and infringers usually go to the lowest hanging fruit. If you have these strategies and you use one, chances are that they're going to go on and move to someone else. Also, Amazon will enforce it for you. Google, if it's your website will, sometimes your host will enforce it. So a federal court will enforce it sometimes. So it just depends. But you have to have a strategy and you have to weave it together. Now, what I did in my firm is we systemized it. So it's not like, what? Oh yeah, well, you can do that for the first time. It's all kind of, we put it together in a system that is really cost effective and mostly involves paralegals and not attorneys. Of course, we oversee it. The second thing is, again, you better believe that when you come time to try and sell your company, the first questions they're going to ask is, please list all trademarks, please list all patents, please list all trade secret agreements. And if you have none or you have one trademark, it's going to decrease the value of your company. So keep in mind, everyone should be looking, at least from legal due diligence, with the end in mind. I know when I was an entrepreneur, the last thing I was thinking about is selling my company, but you want a company that's sellable. And so this is all stuff, and then we can go into more business operational stuff like good contracts and stuff. But this is the stuff you use attorneys for. And so, a trademark for sure at the very beginning, as you're building out content, really looking at that strategy. And then when you're bringing on staff or independent contractors, first make sure they're classified right. But the second thing is they should be signing some kind of trade secret agreement, even though the stuff isn't particularly overly secret. It's not like, again, it's not the Coca-Cola formula, what vendor you're using in China. But at the same time, you're creating that mystique of this is a very important secret organization, and that's how you're building your success. That all goes to brand, right? It all goes to customer experience and what they're thinking about your company.
So much value there. I can't thank you enough. Everyone, I hope you're learning a few things along the way. Be sure to stick around to the end of the show. You're going to get his contact info. Don't worry. And I hope you leverage him from being on the show to being a resource in your network. You just teased something there. Contract talk. I would love your wisdom and expertise to educate our audience here as well.
What I do is, it's been really fun in the fact that, again, most people don't want to talk to me at the very beginning. I mean, they're almost like, I think it's intimidating to talk to an attorney. I mean, I certainly sometimes don't love it. But the point is, they come with a certain need, and then they realize through that we're really like running around trying to frame your business. And frame it for success. And to do that, we need to understand kind of who you are as an entrepreneur, what your organizational culture is, and then, who you're going to be working with. And so a lot of times it's a supplier agreement, or it's an employee agreement, or it can be general terms and conditions that you're going to put on your website. All those things are contractual. And so the first thing, and we do this on our dime, we really want to get to know you and act kind of as your general counsel. So when things come up like that, we kind of like, oh, you're the client with the SaaS business that's focused on school counselors. Okay. We know that a lot of times that the school counselor will already have a contract or terms and conditions with their employer, meaning the school district. We know that there's HIPAA, which is healthcare violation. So we kind of, once we know what the company is and where they fit in kind of our framework, in that case, psychology or something along those lines, we kind of know what would need to be in that particular type of contract to, number one, create obligations that your company can run consistently and without, you're not going to run into legal issues. And number two is that it's framed for the type of business that you have. And so that when we start getting into the kind of the contractual relationships and what type of contracts our clients need, which is usually a supplier vendor type of arrangement, and also some kind of an employee or independent contractor agreement discussing what the roles and responsibilities are. And third, anything client interfacing. So a lot of times, for example, an e-commerce company will stick up terms and conditions that they ripped off someone else. I mean, they're general, but there's certain things that your particular product does or field that it's in that needs customized terms and conditions. Otherwise, number one, they're not going to be enforced because the court's going to look at them like if you hit a dispute and be like, you know what, these weren't even written for your particular goods or services. And that looks like you look like you're exposed. Let's put it that way. And you look like an idiot. The point is all those things need to kind of be reviewed and but the first step is, again, we usually start with brand and then we move into operations. Like what does your company look like? And a lot of times, again, my blog actually on LinkedIn is The Empathetic Attorney, because I've been through all this. I needed to do all this. And me as an attorney, I thought, oh, I'll do it. But no, that's a different role. You're CEO and even COO. You're not, or even chief marketing, you're not the person that sit around and write the contract. So the idea is build a win-win relationship with an attorney specifically, and it doesn't have to be me, but one that doesn't charge to get to know you and understand your business, or for 10-minute calls to you get a bill. You have to work with an attorney who kind of understands your business, and then you're going to kind of get into what kind of contractual relationships you need, and frankly what you don't need and what you can use for form. Because a lot of stuff, like for example, I'm not huge on spending a ton of money on employment manuals. Like I think that a lot of the employment manuals can come from your HR company, because you have a payroll service, and they have a form that they're paying big money for an attorney to look at. You can work off that and then show it to someone like me, and we can in 20, maybe not 20 minutes, but an hour, customize it to meet your needs. So there's certain things that you don't need. You need also to figure out when you don't need an attorney and when you do, and you need kind of that relationship where you feel free to either email or call, or that no one's, and you like the person enough that they have a personality and are empathetic enough to be like, well, I don't want to get a bill for 10 minutes to talking about, like, should I do this, should I do that? So the point is once you get there, then you get to the kind of the big contracts. Also, if anytime you're taking on money, investors, I can't tell you how serious that is, how serious a decision it is, because the moment you take on money, it's not really your company 100%. And number two, what the terms and conditions of raising that money are, and that it's also seriously regulated. The same holds true with contracts with any private lender or a bank. That is serious, serious stuff. When you get your loan call and you had no idea that could even happen to you, and it's happened to me, you're like, I wish I would have talked to an attorney, read the contract, because now I have zero cash and I owe the bank hundreds of thousands of dollars just because they decided, based on, there's some economists saying that the interest rates are going to go up, or something nothing to do with you. Your loan's called and you don't have an alternative source of financing. That's like your parents either need to be rich or you're in big trouble. So, it's all those types of things where that kind of, again, you start with the IP plan, but then it starts weaving in all those things as you grow a successful business. And what's fun is getting to the M&A table where you're like, all right, let's execute. We have all this put together. Let's see a successful exit for you.
Oh man, the value's been endless. You're really getting everyone thinking about the non-sexy stuff. We talked about how this meeting may not be a looking forward to type of meeting, but you see these, silly numbers all the time, how many businesses don't go to year 2, 3, and what have you. A lot of it's the back end stuff, the accounting, this type of stuff. Everybody just wants to go on social media really and put their posts, but you're making some great points. I'm really glad we've had the opportunity to connect, to bring this all to the show. But I do have another area I'd like to talk to with you about, as I know you can add some value, analyzing and addressing supply chain risk. What can you offer on that topic?
Sure. Well, I spend a ton of time studying supply chain. This year, I've traveled to India, Europe, Dubai, and where else did I go? Somewhere else, Canada. I guess that's not as exciting the other one. But anyway, the point is and I'm actually a teacher at the World Trade Center teaching courses in supply chain. But the point is, every supply chain has its risks and benefits. Having gone to India and studying their supply chain and going to factories, it's an interesting option. Like, it is not, oh, well, let's discount this. But there are lots of reasons why, or things to take into consideration by looking at alternative supply chain. What we know about China is that it's very efficient. It's very controlled, meaning they control a lot of the factories world, and it's cost effective, and the shipping channels are usually open, and the risk is obviously that there might be tariffs, or the company or they might, put more parameters on trade, either China or the United States. And so, we have to be looking at alternative supply chains because you have to know what your risk is or think that it could occur. The other thing about China is that they are very protective of their own intellectual property. Like they'll enforce their own laws, but they don't necessarily care about your law. And so we have a pretty robust relationship with Chinese counsel. We always have used the same counsel year after year after year, and we just have a good relationship with them to analyze the particular risk for that particular good or usually good coming out of China. And so a lot of times we'll take the American strategy, give them the template, and then they analyze what they'll need in China. The bills are remarkably light, like $800, $600. It's kind of like if you saw that in I don't know, I just renewed my ski pass and I saw that, for $600, I could get insurance for the rest of my life on whether if I break a leg, I get the money for the pass back. I'd probably do it. But the point is that's kind of, you have to have that kind of insurance risk if you really want to ensure that your supply chain is protected in China. India is almost the opposite. It's like if they speak English, it's an extremely bureaucratic country, and everything has 18 steps where it could be two. The quality of the goods is a lot less there's a lot more custom manufacturing going on, especially in clothing and apparel. And so, it's a country that's on the rise. So there's a lot to contemplate in India. One problem in India is that same intellectual property strategy that you try and employ in China, which is an efficient country or known to be efficient, in India would take years. It's just not particularly efficient. And working with even communication gaps, we have great Indian counsel, but everything is a little slower, a little more chaotic. And so that just kind of goes to the local culture. We're doing a lot right now. We're doing a lot of work out of Vietnam and just kind of alternatives to China. And, again, you just have to take into the consideration what the local culture is and really make sure that we have efficient counsel, a counsel that's not going to charge you an arm and a leg to look at the thing. A lot of foreign countries, our counsel will have free consultations, but we have to come to them with a plan because they're not going to be, we're pretty patient, just as it's kind of a practice philosophy, but they have things to do. So we come to them with a plan. We take and analyze, what the risk factors are. But again, you don't want to kind of go to a place that doesn't have efficient shipping channels and, you're the first there. That's going to be, that risk is way too high. And so really, looking at established shipping channels is easy. And then on the flip side, why I'm part of a number of international groups is then we look at, okay, what's the supply chain coming in? Where are you shipping out? Because a lot of times, you're going to you get EU orders or you get British orders. You really have to look at, all right, well, is my trademark infringing someone else's in that country? Because I could get sued. And that happens to a few of my clients. And then we have to, and the laws in some of these countries, it's it's not going to go away. And so you really have to look at that really quickly. I have the software to do it, and I'll do that almost for free. But we have to look at what the lay of the land is to any country you're shipping into. Particularly, I know most of my clients are shipping into Canada. That's a given, and we really don't. Not every client uses me as effectively as I'd like, and a lot of times we're not really looking at. They're not calling or telling me that they're shipping into Canada, and then we hit an issue there, and it's wow, we didn't really look at this Canadian trade.
Should have called me.
Yeah, exactly, or I should ask. But the point is, and usually again, startup is pretty easy because you're not doing anything, you're just getting the baseline done. Then you start seeing success and you're busy. Again, who wants to talk to the attorney? So or the accountant. It's just the call it's no one looks forward to it. So I realize that I've been where they are. And
well, I really am
keeping it efficient and
I'm blown away by the continued advice you brought to this show. You're bringing a lot of people to the very baseline of what they need to start paying attention to. I had to start looking at these things. People, don't give up on your dreams. Keep pushing, keep striving, even if you don't want to sell. And I love the way you put that. It's always nice to strive to build a sellable company because it shows the values there, what you need to have in place. But before I let you go, it's a question I brought back for all of my entrepreneurs that started in the beginning. If you could sit down with any entrepreneur, dead or alive, who you don't know if they are alive, who would you choose to pick their brain?
Any entrepreneur. You know what? It's interesting. I'm going to see him. I really like music. And so there's this guy, and as I get older, I'm starting to like jazz more.
Okay.
And so there's this guy, his name is Herb Albert, and he was like a famous jazz trumpeter, but he's better known for starting A&M Records. And so he was just a jazz player, just like anyone else. And the next thing record companies aren't what they used to be. But he sat down and started this label. And almost every, not only jazz, but every rock musician, it was a huge label back in the day. And how do you get from just, sitting down and playing jazz to
I love
building this
that.
record empire? That's really when, there was no template for that. These days, it's like, all right, there's someone to look at when you're looking at, tech entrepreneurs. Like you have Steve Jobs, but he had a mentor, in that day, it's like no one was thinking about like how to be that. So that was my newest, like I'd love to, and he's still alive. He's actually coming to Denver.
Oh, you
I'd
got to
love to
tag him
sit
in the
down with him
show.
and take him and figure out like how do you get from point A to point B when no one else has done that? Like,
You have
you're
to
just
tag him, Steven. Go to his show, tag him on the show, get that introduction. I
yeah,
believe
because
that it
he's
would
now
be just
multi
as,
multi multi millionaire.
and you never know. I mean, that one social media message could be answered. That, as I'm a big believer in my quote, is it only takes one connection, one email answered, one interview that I have with someone where you can change each other's life. So I think that would be a great connection. But now I do have to thank you so much for taking the time to stop with our community of entrepreneurs today. I had a great time getting to know you, all the value you brought forward in a unique field where I don't often get lawyers. I do, people that own their own law practices, but it's not as common as, for, we'll say, a more common like a marketing or something. So
Mhm.
it's nice for me because I do have goals of diversifying, because it's not about just your industry. Something you say may resonate with someone. Where you're from may resonate with someone. So thanks for all you brought today. Where can we find you online? Anything else you got going on?
Sure. So our website is www.emerge, E-M-E-R-G-E, counsel, counsel.com. And all my blogs and everything are up on that website. Also, I always like to meet people. And so even if, you don't have an immediate legal need or I want to learn about you and your company, and you shouldn't feel remotely scared to schedule some time with me. It's on my scheduling link to just shoot the breeze. And one thing that resonated with me is when I started my business, a very successful, billionaire entrepreneur told me, Steve, you got to just pick up the phone and call. Like you can't be scared to call anyone. The most thing that's going to happen to you is they're going to hang up or tell you to F off. So it's like, and then, if you can't take that, you shouldn't be an entrepreneur to begin with. So anyway, the
Love it.
point is reach out to me, reach out to other resources. I have plenty of other resources that can help you in any aspect of the journey. And it's, again, I went and practiced law again because it's rewarding to watch businesses grow, and basically I didn't have a plan B. So
Well,
anyway,
thanks for sharing that, everyone. Be sure to connect with Steven. This is That Entrepreneur Show. We are here every week. Please like, subscribe, leave a rating and a review for our guest of honor today. My name is Vincent A. Lancy, and you can find me online at any socials with that name or vincentalancy.com. Today's show sponsor is Coming Alive Podcast Production. Get your podcast journey started today at comingalivepodcastproduction.com. And with that, we are signing off from out in Denver to down here in Florida. Steven, thank you for reaching out and thank you for joining the show.
sure. My pleasure. Nice to talk to you, Vincent.